Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. There was some technical issues with trying some new software. So hopefully you've found me. I just set up a new live space, so hopefully you guys can see me and it's all running now. So I have a lovely tea for you today. So this is a brand in New Zealand called Tea Aura. Tea Aura. It's lovely. They have these beautiful blends. Chamomile, lemon, and honey is the one that I'm having today. So, and I have it in my beautiful cup. It's got Melissa written on it. I got given this by someone, so it's really lovely. If you are here with me, please feel free to say hello and share any questions that you might have. Today, we're going to be talking about associated symptoms of endometriosis. So, basically, these are symptoms that the kind of common symptoms. So if you're not sure if you have endometriosis, if you're kind of like, is this just bad period pain, what's going on, I'll be covering that, but I'll also be covering things that you may not attribute to endometriosis. And I'm not blaming endometriosis for these things, but it is part of kind of a bigger picture. If you wanted to assess whether you have or someone you know has endometriosis without necessarily going down the path of getting an official diagnosis. Here's the thing, an official diagnosis requires surgery, and surgery in itself can be attributing to actually inflammation in the body, which doesn't really help support the body to heal. So in some instances, that surgery may not be necessary and actually can be harmful. My sister is an example of that. She had no symptoms whatsoever her whole life that she attributed to her period. So she didn't think anything much. She had a little bit of pain during her period and didn't really associate that with having endometriosis. Then she developed an endometrioma and had to go in for surgery for that, or she believed she had to go in for surgery for that. And then they found endometriosis in her abdominal area. So it wasn't until much later in life that she kind of discovered that she had endometriosis. But since then, she has really found it really difficult and has found that her body is much more in severe pain. She's really struggling a lot more with symptoms, and all these things have become exacerbated due to having that initial surgery. So I'm not anti-surgery, but I just want people to be mindful of that decision. And sometimes we're so desperate for a diagnosis because maybe we've been through a lot and we haven't necessarily got the, I guess, people haven't listened. We haven't had doctors say, take us seriously, and people around us may kind of dismiss what we're going through. And so having some kind of diagnosis can actually feel give you a sense of relief that it isn't just all in your head because you've been told that for so many years. So I also know how that can feel. So, but just be mindful of that decision. So really this video is all about just looking at the symptoms of typical endometriosis. What does that typically look like? And then I'm going to give you some associated symptoms as well. So the first one is really pain. Pain is generally the most common symptom. Not to say that all women with endometriosis experience pain. As I mentioned, my sister had, endometriosis pretty much probably from when she started her menstruation, but never experienced much period pain. Typically, though, this is a big symptom indicator. So the type of pain typically is around your period or your menstrual cycle. And normally that pain is quite intense. So for many women, the pain intensity is massive to the point where they can't just take a couple of painkillers and then everything is fine. Normally that intensity of pain also develops over years. So it actually worsens over time. And I know for myself, the pain was debilitating to the point where I couldn't go to work, I couldn't move. I literally was in bed for the first 2 days of my menstrual cycle, and going to the toilet was painful. Just the whole experience was horrendous. I mean, to the point I was throwing up. It was just unbelievably painful. So that is normally a key indicator of period pain, and having that as a sort of major symptom with endometriosis. So if you're here with me today, please feel free to share in the comments. I'm sorry if we got lost today. Had some technical issues, couldn't get the other thing to work. So hopefully you guys all found me. We're going to be talking about symptoms of endometriosis today. So if you want to share your own experience, if there's things that you want to ask me about this, if you're not sure if you have endometriosis, if you're concerned about something, feel free to use the comment section and share your questions or thoughts. So now, where was I? So the first one is really pain. Now that pain extends outside of just period pain. Women also experience ovulation pain. So typically that would be around about mid-cycle. So the actual process of ovulation can be painful, and that's often associated with either there's cysts on the ovary, or there's an adhesion there that is restricting that natural process. So that's where that pain can come from. That's another indicator. The other one is more sort of broad. So you may have pain during sex, and particularly the kind of pain I'm talking about here is that deep inner pain. So I'm not talking about the pain where maybe you're actually your vaginal space isn't ready for penetration. I'm talking about that deep inner pain where if your partner goes too deep, it really, really hurts. So that's a quite different pain. And that is typically associated with endometriosis because there's so much inflammation going on there. There's adhesions that are restricting the movement of the organs in that space. And because of that, obviously, having deep penetration in that space will cause a bit of pain, because normally those organs can move freely, but now there's adhesions causing them to be stuck together. And so then, of course, that will be painful. Other sort of pain may be going to the toilet. So if you have pain passing a bowel movement, if you have pain even going for a wee, these are normally associated with endometriosis, where depending on where that endometriosis is sitting, that can cause things to be sort of stuck, or there's a lack of movement once again, and so that can be quite painful. Also, of course, if you have adhesions that are restricting movement in a space, then that will cause more pain with those natural body motions. So, the digestive tract is supposed to have a natural process of peristalsis. Now, those are muscles that contract and, to cause you to be able to go to the toilet. Now, if that actual colon is restricted due to adhesions, then of course that will be painful as well. Now, the other forms of pain can extend outward from there. So you may just have abdominal pain. So this general kind of ache is what I know I had for many, many years. And here's where it starts to get interesting, because that general ache is actually more almost a signal of just inflammation in that peritoneal cavity. So the peritoneal cavity is essentially everything, all the organs that sit in that lower abdominal area of your body. And because there is inflammation due to the endometriosis, that causes pain, that causes inflammation. And of course, that's what you know as pain. But there's an overlap here. So just because you have endometriosis doesn't mean that that's where the only source of pain. Oftentimes there is an overflow of whatever's in that peritoneal fluid. So there may be infection, there may be stuff going on in the gut there's a crossover between them, and the mast cells or inflammatory cells cross over between those spaces. And so that pain, that sort of dull ache, isn't necessarily associated just with endometriosis. It's often also there's something going on with the digestive system. So that brings us to one of the associated symptoms of endometriosis. And that one would really be what's going on with the digestive system. I cannot tell you how many women I have consulted over the years, worked with, and there is always some kind of digestive imbalance. So when you're sitting there and you're literally making a list of all the things going on in your body and you feel like it's a very long list, just know that it's everything that's going on. There's an imbalance and it's a holistic approach. So it's not about saying, well, actually, I have almost every body system, there's something wrong. It's not like that. When you heal everything. And typically, the digestive system is a big part of healing with endometriosis because there is a lot of imbalances going on there. And that is really an associated symptom with endometriosis, and it's a big one. So there's generally some kind of imbalance in the digestive tract. So that could be condition like Candida, could be H. pylori, there could be some parasites. That in itself, I believe, is a big trigger for the development of endometriosis because the immune system is now being triggered, and it's actually that immune response that is causing the additional inflammation and hence the endometriosis, etc., from there. If you guys missed it last week, I announced we are going to be launching a free introductory course, which I'm literally just putting the finishing touches on now. That's going to explain a lot more in terms of the 3 key triggers with endometriosis. So if you really want to get that, let me know in the comments or feel free to email me support@endoempowered.com and I will make sure that you guys get access to that. We will go into the 3 key areas of endometriosis, what to focus on, what's actually going on, because approaching endometriosis naturally and holistically is very, very different. We don't just look at hormone imbalance. To me, that is a symptom. That is not actually the key trigger here. So if you guys want that, please let me know and I'll be happy to share that with you. Okay, does anyone have any questions? I've been rambling a little bit this morning. Just because I got stumbled with going live didn't work. I don't know what happened, but yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions on that. I'm just going to drink my chamomile tea because chamomile is a combinative, which I possibly need this morning. And it's also a mild sedative, so can kind of calm you down. Yeah, I didn't actually read about my tea this morning, so I should probably tell you these things. One of the cool things, actually, with chamomile is it does fight off candida, which, interestingly enough, is one of the things that often is attributed with having endometriosis. So one of the associated symptoms with having endometriosis. Okay, that's very nice. If you missed it, this is the brand that we're promoting today, Tea Aura. It's a New Zealand brand. It's got chamomile, lemon, and honey with, of course, manuka leaf. Anyone from New Zealand would know manuka is the thing here. We have manukas, plants, and manuka honey. It's just beautiful, really, really high quality honey with lots of good antibacterial and all sorts of goodies in it. So yeah, all right. Okay, so moving on, our next associated symptom would be allergies, and particularly things like hay fever, rashes, skin rashes, those kinds of sensitivities to foods. There is a definite connection here with kind of this overreaction. So when you think about hay fever or allergies from pollen, for instance, basically what's happening is the body is associating that pollen with a severe threat. And so it reacts in the same way, like it's under massive threat. And so it's flushing out that pollen in whichever method it can think of. So runny eyes, you get sneezes, the body is just trying to expel that pollen. But the reaction in itself is quite extreme because pollen isn't bad for us. There's nothing in pollen that's going to cause anyone to die from pollen. So we have to ask, well, why is the body reacting to such an extreme? What is going on there? And that is a very similar reaction to what I believe is happening with endometriosis. So, and oftentimes I see a correlation here, an associated symptom like allergies, like having food sensitivity, like this essential overreaction to something that may not actually be that harmful. Okay. Obviously, I get that there are people who are allergic to specific foods like, peanuts. That's quite different. But I'm talking more in terms of allergies like hay fever, which really it's just an overreaction to something that isn't actually that life-threatening. Now, when you look at what endometriosis is, it's a disbursement of cells in the abdominal cavity. And instead of the body just kind of cleaning that up and going, okay, these things are just in the wrong place, we'll just clean that up, it overreacts towards those cells. And it's this overreaction which then causes the proliferation, the adhesions, the development essentially of endometriosis. And so I always ask, well, why is this happening? There's a really cool study about this where they showed that 90% of women actually have these dispersed cells in the abdominal cavity, and yet 50% of them develop endometriosis, while 40% of them do not. So why does that happen? And so that is an associated symptom, that kind of hay fever response, that histamine response, and that elevation of those histamine response. So that is something that I explore quite a lot actually in this free course that I've developed for you guys, is really this overreaction towards those dispersed cells. But often we see an associated symptom of hay fever with women with endometriosis, which is why I've mentioned it today as one of the associated symptoms. Okay, so we've covered 3 already. So we've done pain, the digestive system, and hay fever. So those are sort of the 3 key ones that often women experience with having endometriosis. Another one is other autoimmune conditions. So this isn't always the case, but I have seen that women often develop other autoimmune conditions with having endometriosis. So they may have thyroid activity that's hyper. They may have lupus or other, rheumatoid arthritis, anything where there is essentially heightened inflammation in the body. And the way that you can tell if there's kind of this heightened inflammation in the body is generally there is some other experience of pain in the body. So rheumatoid arthritis, there's pain in the joints, there's this essentially oversensitivity, overreaction. And that comes back to the same question of why is the immune system reacting that way? So that would be another associated symptom, is really this over-inflammatory response, and having conditions that have that similar high inflammation response. Now, the way we combat that, I guess, is really looking at inflammation as a whole, across the whole body. What is the trigger here? Because heightened inflammation in itself is a trigger. There's a trigger there that's happening as to why has the body put itself in that state. And so maybe it's looking at what are you eating. Maybe there's things in your diet that are triggering high inflammatory response in the body. Maybe there's stuff happening in the gut that is causing that. So there's an imbalance in the gut. And because of that, the lining of the gut is actually inflamed. And due to that response, that lining becomes inflamed. And so particles of food are coming into the body without the proper barriers. And that in itself can cause the immune system to overreact again. So this is very common with gluten, and this is why we generally don't recommend gluten, because there is some kind of digestive irritant in gluten for a lot of women with endometriosis. There is a study where they showed that women experienced a 75% improvement by eliminating gluten out of their diet. And the reason is because if this gut is inflamed, which given what I've just seen in, sort of one of the key associated symptoms with endometriosis is digestive issues, and then you add something like gluten, which is an irritant. And the reason it's an irritant is questionable. Firstly, there is a protein inside of wheat, which is called gliadin. And this is what can be an irritant because the body isn't able to break down that protein. And so it's almost like this big solid thing that's now coming into the digestive system that it doesn't know what to do with. Secondly, a lot of the wheat products have been altered over the years. So often that gluten is just in a higher quantity because more gluten in wheat actually makes it easier to make bread. It's more kind of gooey, I guess it's more kind of got that strength in it. And over the years, that wheat crop has been altered. So there's a lot more gluten inside of the wheat. So obviously that can be part of why that may become an irritant, because if you're having a lot more of that protein and now you don't have the enzymes to break down that protein, well, then once again, you're going to have these excess gliadins kind of coming into the digestive system being an irritant. And thirdly, wheat is sprayed with a lot of insecticides and particularly something called glyphosate, which is obviously like a toxin, and that is going to irritate the gut. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't recommend gluten with having endometriosis. And when that gut lining is already, when there's already imbalances in the gut, and then you add something like gluten, now you've irritated that gut lining. It's, you're now going to have essentially what happens when the gut lining gets irritated, it expands because it becomes inflamed. And now food particles can escape into the space that they're not supposed to be in. The immune system comes in, it's now hypervigilant, and you get an immune response, which ultimately leads to an inflammatory response. And because that's in the peritoneal fluid or the peritoneal cavity of the whole abdominal area, now there is this heightened inflammation. So it's like there's an alert, if you imagine like an alert going on, there's alarms, bells going, all that kind of carry on. Well, this response happens across that whole space. It's not just in the gut. It's not just, one location. But even though medically they like us to believe that the body is compartmentalized, it isn't. Everything flows into each other. The blood flows here, the lymphatics flow, the fluids flow, everything is all blended together. So it's not one issue, it's across the board. And so when this happens, now you've got this heightened inflammation, then that can trigger all sorts of other inflammation throughout the whole body. And that would include things like having lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, like endometriosis. So that's why the gut is such an important part of the healing picture. That's why we need to look at what's happening with the gut and actually address some of the triggers for those imbalances. Ironically, going on the synthetic hormones, going on the contraceptive pill, these things actually cause imbalances in the gut, particularly the contraceptive pill. We dismiss it. We go, oh, it's just a little pill. What's the big deal? But it's synthetic. And it alters the microbiome. So the dudes that live in your gut that create a nice balance in there, it alters that because it alters the pH of the bowel, and all the microbiome dudes that are living in there. And so then you get imbalances. And one of the most common imbalances I see is something called candida. And that's why I'm drinking my tea, because chamomile is one of the ways that you can combat candida. Obviously, there's a lot more to candida and really balancing that. But one of the things that women often experience with endometriosis is also a huge craving for sugar. And that sugar craving can often be correlated back to actually imbalances in the gut. So, yes, I know you think you just need to motivate yourself to get off sugar, but oftentimes it's actually coming back to what is driving that. And candida is a big driver because candida loves sugar. It feeds on sugar. And so the more you have sugar, the more the candida grows. And then the candida gets rampant. And then, of course, you want more sugar. And so it's this vicious cycle. So actually treating candida is kind of key. Do you guys have any questions? Anything you want to share on this? I know we had a bit of an issue today with getting on the live, so please feel free to watch this after if you missed the beginning. But yeah, we're talking about associated symptoms of endometriosis and what could be going on. So we've covered pain as the first one. We've looked at our digestive system as being imbalanced, and often there is imbalances there with women with endo. So looking at the digestive system, what's going on. There's autoimmune conditions, and then there's also something called, there's allergies. So often women have allergies along with having endometriosis. Now, I did write an article quite some time ago, actually, which talks all about the 20 associated symptoms of endometriosis. So if you guys want to read that one, it's got a lot more ideas in here as well. So if you really want to dive into that, I'll just share the link for you in the comments. Those are really a lot more. So they give you a lot more ideas and thinking kind of broader about your endometriosis. And I really want you guys to get out of this idea that it's compartmentalized. It's not. Everything that's going on in your body will affect everything else. But here's the good news. When you heal everything and all the symptoms go away and all the imbalances go away. So rather than just looking at it, well, I have endometriosis and everything is because of the endometriosis, which I often hear that, it's not like that. There's imbalances, and those imbalances cause an inflammatory response in the body, and it's going to display in various areas of the body. Okay, so yeah, so really think about it quite differently. Now, the other one that I guess is I don't know if I would necessarily call it a symptom, but it's certainly a trait that I've noticed with women with endometriosis, is there is a tendency to be extremist, so we tend to have this tendency towards perfectionism or extreme diets or extreme anything. Like, even when something happens in our life, it's always to the extreme. Like it's the worst possible thing. It's, everything has this maxed idea behind it rather than sort of taking things more lightly. And I don't know if this could be attributed to hormone imbalances, because certainly there are hormone imbalances would be an associated symptom of endometriosis. But I see this more like a personality trait, and it's almost this. I guess there's a little bit of an inkling towards being like a drama queen, and I can vouch for myself. I'm definitely have those tendencies where everything is very extreme, like things don't go my way, and it's like just quit everything, or I just have this kind of very and I have to catch myself to not go to this extreme way of thinking. And I think women have this within their journey. So, I've tried everything, and it's like, well, you can't possibly have tried everything. Or this idea that the pain is like it's going to kill me. And it's the wording that we use is often quite dangerous. And I think I'm pointing it out because I really want you guys to think about how you speak and how you think, and this sort of extreme way of viewing things, and being mindful of how that has an impact on your healing journey. Because I did this for years, like, how much worse can this pain get? How severe can this endo get? It's spreading everywhere. Like, I just had this very extreme way of thinking, and everything you think is either taking away or providing anxiety. And anxiety, unfortunately, is going to attribute to inflammation going up. Inflammation going up means more pain, more endometriosis growth, more adhesions. So we really want to get anxiety under control. And one of those things is really looking at your thoughts and looking at how you view things, and shifting away from this extreme way of thinking about life, extreme way of handling situations, and just, I found for myself just this constant repeating of everything's going to be okay. It's not that bad. We're still alive. Everything's going to be okay. Just this repeating. So I think that's something I really wanted to bring up today, is this connection with our thoughts and the power of our thoughts, because so often we're so focused on diet and symptoms and taking a bunch of supplements, and it's all about the control, which, interestingly enough, when you think about that a little bit, but the need for control is part of that extremist thinking and that perfectionism thinking. And so really give that a little bit of thought today. Really just think about how you might be doing that, and feel free to share in the comments. So Becky has a comment. Unfortunately, the software that I was using didn't quite work, so I'm just gonna have to read it out if you guys can't see it. So she's just sharing that she definitely has some of these symptoms. She has extreme gas pain before and during her period, which hurts so bad even before while walking. So gas pain is, there's a lot of factors going on here. So firstly, when it's during your period, when you're having your period, just remember that everything's a little bit swollen. Your uterus is trying to push out blood. So it's working quite hard. And so those muscles are contracting and expelling. So that's going to put pressure on your digestive system. But from what you've explained, and I mean, I don't want to come to any conclusions, it sounds to me like there may be some kind of digestive imbalance. And one of the other ones that's very common with endometriosis is something called Sibo. So Sibo stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which basically means the bacteria that are supposed to be higher up in your digestive system have been pushed up. So they're supposed to be further down. They get pushed into the small intestine. So they're meant to be in the large intestine. They're pushed up into the small intestine. And there's a lot of reasons why this could happen. But if you think about what endometriosis, what's happening there, often there is adhesions that are attached to the bowel. And then that's going to cause restriction of the large bowel, which means it's not able to, like if you think about gravity, it's not able to expel. And so some of those bacteria that are supposed to be in the large bowel may actually then go into the small intestinal bacteria, small intestine. So that could be a factor. Gas pain can be easily resolved. So, it's really looking at your microbiome and the balance there. The reason there's gas is because things are fermenting at a very rapid rate. So if you think about, I guess, bodily processes, things are going to ferment, they're going to break down. Now, when there's a lot of that going on, and things aren't getting broken down really well, then there's going to be a lot of gas release. It could be SIBO. It could be that you're just not digesting your food very well. And don't worry, like this is very, very common with endo, so I don't want you to feel badly about that at all. It's very, very common. The reason we don't digest food that well is because we're actually not taking care of our eating patterns. We're not eating very well. Many women, when they have this, because coming back to that whole mindset idea of extremism, so many women will work extra. They will work extra long hours. Food is sort of a secondary thing. It's not a priority. Eating's not a priority. Cooking's not a priority. And all of those things contribute to a lackluster desire to eat. And because of that, there's no stimulation in the stomach to actually want to break down that food. Um, Women eating at their desk, having food while working, not actually being present. So maybe you're sitting on your phone, you're, not really present with what you're eating. You're not really conscious of what you're eating, or being stressed while you eat, or having conversations about things that stress you out and not being present with your food, drinking water or liquids while you're eating. All of these things will contribute to that digestive process just not working that well. Not chewing enough, just not being excited about food. And I know I can totally, totally, totally share that experience, because I've never been a huge, I'm not somebody who loves food. I don't get super excited about food, most of the time, because it's just never been something that I've prioritized. And so it's really about stimulating those digestive juices in the stomach so that your food is broken down correctly. When we don't do this, that food gets passed down, and guess what? It actually becomes part of the job of your microbiome to try and break that down. And all these things, solid things, are now sitting in there, which, guess what they're going to do? They're going to ferment, and that's going to release gas. So it's actually coming back to the basics. So I'm not sure if you were able to watch the diet principles Tea with Mel series, Becky, but that would be a really good one for you to watch, because I share a lot of the concepts in there about how important it is actually to make sure that you're digesting your food correctly. But certainly have a look at Sibo as well. That is also definitely a factor for many women with endo. But I would probably start by just looking at, what are your eating patterns? What are you eating? Are you digesting your food correctly? And how can you really support yourself with that? A few little tips on that. So have something bitter to actually get the salivary glands going. So if you're not finding that you're salivating with food, you're not getting excited about food, use something that's bitter, that actually stimulates those digestive juices in the stomach. You can either have a really bitter salad, which used to be what people used to do. So I used to have a salad before mains, and things like dandelion root, rocket, things that are kind of bitter. They don't taste nice, but they will stimulate those digestive juices. Or you can just buy like a bitter spray. So there's like a spray that you can just spray into your mouth that actually stimulates the digestive juices, that has a very similar effect. And that in itself will then stimulate those digestive juices, and then hopefully you'll be able to break down your food a bit better. The other thing you can do is get digestive enzymes, which is kind of cheating, because, obviously we want our own digestive enzymes being created in the body. But sometimes there's a hurdle, because here's the loop, okay? So if you don't have digestive enzymes, you can't break down a lot of the food. If you're not breaking down a lot of the food, you're not getting all the nutrients you need from that food. So it's kind of this vicious loop. So having digestive enzymes for a period of time, but not forever, just to support your body to be able to break down food initially, so that you can get the nutrients, and particularly the proteins, from that food, to then build your own digestive enzymes. So the digestive enzymes are made up of proteins, and often when there's a digestive issue, proteins is something that we really struggle to break down. And so having digestive enzymes just to help with that initially will really just support your whole body to be able to break those foods down and therefore have the building blocks to build your own digestive enzymes. I hope that makes sense. But everything in the body is generally a loop. So when there is an issue, sometimes we need supplements just to support ourselves through that. But I'm never a fan of taking supplements ongoing. We need to look at what's the trigger, because otherwise, like taking supplements forever and ever and ever isn't really solving anything. Those imbalances need to be corrected, and we need to look at the root triggers of what's going on there. So I hope that helps, Becky. I feel like I gave you quite a long answer, so hopefully that all makes sense, and you're able to work with that. And feel free to share any other thoughts you have on that. Sibo treatment, I do have a protocol in our Endo Empowered Academy as it stands at the moment. I am looking at developing a specific digestive program down the track, but for now it is all available in the Endo Empowered Academy. If you're a member, you can get access to the treatments in there. There's some amazing herbs that can really help support you through treating of Sibo, and one of the biggest ones is an ingredient found in garlic, which I can't remember the name of right now, but it's starts with A. Allicin, I think. Yeah, allicin is what it's, and that actually it kills off those bacteria which are in the wrong place. So once again, it's a protocol. You do it for a period of time, and then you rectify that imbalance, and then you move on. You don't continue to take these things. I'm just really mindful. So many women have shared with me, they're doing these things for a really long time, and it's really dangerous. We need our microbiome, and whether it's herbal, whether it's not herbal, whatever treatments you go on, be mindful that there is a period of time that we do things for, and we want to correct the reason for those imbalances underneath that. So if you're treating Candida, if you're treating Sibo, if you're on a FODMAPs, if you're doing any of these protocols, they're only supposed to be for a period of time. But during that time, you need to be healing the reason that they were caused in the first place. And it's important that you do that, because otherwise you're not actually healing anything. It's like you're just treating the symptom of, Sibo and Candida and all those things. You're just treating the symptoms of that, but you're not treating the reason they occurred, which means they just come back. And you're just having those same symptoms over and over again, which is where I see women get stuck, where they just pretty much live on a FODMAPs diet, which is just not nourishing enough for the body long term. Going on protocols where you're taking these antimicrobial herbs or, things like that long term, it's just not meant to be like that. They kill off the good guys, the good microbiome in the gut. Yes, when you're treating Sibo, sure, you want to do that because they're in the wrong place, but long term, you don't want to be doing that. I often get women who get testing done on the microbiome, and what we find is there's just a very low volume of the bacteria that are supposed to be in the gut, just a low volume. And I often think that this relates partly to just doing too much, coming back to point number 5, which is just doing too much, this perfectionism, this control, this push, this extremism, which I see repeatedly, having these extreme diets, being so focused on just controlling everything. That's not the answer. It's really not the answer. It's really looking at, okay, what is causing this? Let's treat the cause, but then we need to support ourselves emotionally, mentally, physically, so that things don't come back, so that we understand what holistic really means. So it's a bit of a rant for today, but I'm just so mindful of people taking my information and they're not using it the way that it was designed, and sort of this extremist approach. which isn't really the answer. It's not the way forward. We really want to look at treating the whole body and from a holistic point of view and looking at all those aspects, because eating at your desk might seem like a really innocent thing, but it's not. It's showing so many things. It's showing that you can't allocate time for yourself to even have lunch. You're working so hard that you're putting yourself as second. You are, you know, your work has become too much of a priority where you're not actually looking after yourself in the process. And if you're eating during lunch, that means you're doing it in other areas of your life. You're not prioritizing meals. You're not prioritizing preparation of meals. It's all about speed and just focus on work. Well, that's questionable, and that in itself we have to question. Where's that coming from? What's driving that? What's driving that emotion behind that? Um, and when we look deeper, there's so many layers to that. And often it's this need to prove ourselves. Often there's this need that I need to do more. I'm not enough. I need to do more. And I really invite you to think about this, because unfortunately it's a personality trait that I see a lot with endo. And it could be that generally women feel this way. And, it just happens that I see a lot of women with endo who have this way, but it seems to me like there is some kind of connection. You know, there's certainly a feeling around shame around being a woman. There's shame around our period, our experiences, our sexual experiences, not, being a good girl. This perfectionism thing, there's certainly a lot of correlations there that I can see, and always find it interesting. So don't dismiss that. It's really powerful in terms of your healing, in terms of how you approach your journey, because it isn't just food, supplements. It isn't. There's more to this than that. So, right. So, anyone else have any questions, anything they would like to ask? Sorry, we had some issues today with the live. Hopefully, I will send this out anyway, and then everyone will have a copy. Hopefully next week we won't have the same issues. If there is topics that you'd like me to cover, if there's things I've said today that didn't make sense or you want more depth, feel free to leave a comment or write to us at support@endoempowered.com. I really want to make sure that you have the right information, that you are getting empowered about what you can do for yourself with endo. There's so much misinformation around endometriosis, and because I've experienced it myself and I've helped so many women, I really want to make sure that, women know what can be done. Women are aware of how they have got an influence on how they feel. It's not just live with it and deal with it and, oh, well, just suffer through the pain. There's so much within our control. There's so much we can do. There's so much power in finding these resources, in finding out what's going on with the body, in actually alleviating the real symptoms behind what's going on. And so, I don't want you guys to give up hope or to feel like it's never ending, because it doesn't have to be. There is so much knowledge that I have to share with you, and there's so much hope that, of women who've overcome incredible things with having had endo, women who no longer have endometriosis, literally had a surgery pre and after to prove that all this stuff works. We've had women get pregnant who were told that would never happen. We've had women go from wanting to have a hysterectomy to no longer needing it. So there is a lot of hope there, and there is a lot of tools that I really want you guys to be aware of. So thank you. If there's no other questions today, I'll leave it there. And feel free to reach out if you would like me to cover anything in particular at support@endoempowered.com. Thank you. Bye.